All right, welcome back, and in case you're joining us, it's a top flight television program, Morning Ride, and ready joining us on our next conversation. We have the very Honorable Commissioner for Justice and Attorney General of Delta State. It's our pleasure having you join us this morning.
Good morning. It's always a pleasure to be here. Thank you for
so
inviting
much.
me.
Thank you so much for honoring our invitation.
Thank you.
First of all, I would like to appreciate your presence and congratulate you on the recently successful program that was held, the task force on irregular migration, where you presented a paper which was quite exciting.
Exactly. Interesting. And that was on the occasion of the World Human Trafficking Day celebrated
exactly.
Friday.
Exactly. So
Yes.
we actually it's the World Day Against Human Trafficking
Yes.
actually occurred before we were able to mark it, but we thought it was very important that we put on an event
Okay.
to mark the World Day Against Human Trafficking, and we had a very successful symposium where the members of the task force were able to organize the various elements in the fight against human trafficking. So on the day you saw law enforcement agents, religious leaders, youth-based organizations, and we all came together to have this very important discussion as to what each of us can do in the fight against human trafficking.
Now, talking about fighting human trafficking, irregular migration, how do you intend to do that? I mean, as a ministry now.
So it's an issue that goes beyond the ministry, the Ministry of Justice. Certainly the fight is so big that we need to bring together all the relevant players in this fight against human trafficking. And that is why His Excellency the Governor established the Task Force Against Human Trafficking and Irregular Migration. That task force serves as a focal point of all these different players. So the Ministry of Justice is only one element of the task force.
Okay.
You also have NAPTIP, which is the premier law enforcement agency against human trafficking. You have the Nigerian Immigration Service, you have the NDLEA, you have religious and traditional rulers. So each person who has a role to play comes together. And what we do is we have a focal point where we can share information, devise strategies to ensure that we give the maximum effort possible in the fight against human trafficking.
Okay.
Okay, so as a follow-up to that, your capacity as the Attorney General and Commissioner for Justice, can you just tell us quickly the significance of the intended Delta State Administration of Criminal Justice Bill, the Delta State Civil Justice Bill, and the Delta State Good Governance and Accountability Bill, soon to be passed into law, having gone through a public hearing, especially the last week?
Very, very important question, because each of these bills that you have highlighted has a role to play one way or the other in improving lives for everyday Deltans. Let me start with the Good Governance and Accountability Commission bill. Now, that is a private member's bill, actually, and I should commend the Honourable Member representing the Kano Northeast, I believe, constituency, Tony Eleko
Yes.
He is the main sponsor of that bill. And it actually takes a very bold step, if you ask me, in deepening the fight against corruption in the state. Very few states have taken that step. As you know, we have many agencies at the federal level that are geared in the fight against corruption. But at the state level, not so much. And to me, this is it's deepening federalism in Nigeria when we take these steps to ensure that the fight is multi-level at the federal and the state. And if this bill is enacted, what it will create is a commission that has very broad investigating powers and powers to punish acts of corruption and ensure that public accountability is upheld, which we need to ensure that the various projects we are undertaking as a state yield results for the residents and citizens of Delta State. Now, moving to the other two bills you mentioned, these are very critical bills in the area of the administration of justice. Administration of criminal justice and the administration of civil justice. And both are geared towards addressing inefficiencies in the justice delivery system. So, for instance, in criminal justice, which is a critical area, because this is one of the areas that the ministry plays a big role. We are public prosecutors in the state. And one thing we noticed is that the administration of criminal justice law of 2016, very laudable in its enactment, was not quite achieving the effects we intended. So what we did was we took an evidence-based approach. And what we did was to call for memoranda from the different stakeholders in the criminal justice system to get an idea of how the bill was working for them, and more importantly, the areas they felt were not working as intended. And based on that feedback, we came up with the first draft of the proposed administration of criminal justice bill, put that to public scrutiny again, not just from domestic actors within Delta State, but also international organizations. So we had in attendance the UNODC, and GIZ, which is the German Society for International Cooperation. Again, had very robust discussions, and what we have now is a very comprehensive bill that addresses what we feel are the problematic areas in criminal justice delivery. Same process for civil justice delivery. We want to ensure that access to justice is not just on paper. Typically, when you have a litigant or a client comes to a lawyer, the first thing they want to do is to say, okay, how can we take this matter to court? But going to court is not necessarily the way to secure the most efficient access to justice for that client. I'll give an example. There's this case I always like quoting. It was actually begun, or it actually commenced by my parents in the late 70s, early 80s. And that case, I finished it 35 years later. In 2015 in the Supreme Court.
Such a lingering case.
Such a lingering case, exactly. And if you look at the negative effects that it had, so you had the initial judgment in 1991, where the plaintiffs were awarded as of 1991, quite a significant amount of money, over 30 million naira. Now, if you fast forward to 2015, when the Supreme Court affirmed the decision of the Court of Appeal and the High Court, that 30 million naira had lost 80% of its value.
That's correct.
Almost 70% of the original plaintiffs had passed on.
Yeah.
So when you look at it from an access to justice perspective, they got judgment, but they didn't really secure justice. So the administration of civil justice bill wants to ensure that only the most appropriate cases go to court. And when they have contacts with the courts, it's to streamline the process so they are dealt with as efficiently as possible. So we get cases out of the justice of the court system quickly as possible to ensure that people can get on with their businesses, get on with their everyday lives, which is ultimately what they want.
So when you say appropriate, which now is classified as appropriate or inappropriate case?
Very, very good question. So from experience, you find that some disputes, what is agitating that dispute is a matter of ego.
Okay.
Somebody has hurt my feelings. I feel slighted by somebody.
Perhaps have a connection or the money to take it to court.
Perhaps. But some litigants want to just flex their muscles to say, I will show you who is who.
Yes.
But when it comes down to what is actually driving the disagreement between the two parties, you will find that sometimes all it will take is an apology.
That's right.
I conducted a mediation recently of a case that had been going on for almost 2 or 3 years. And in that mediation session, within 20 minutes, we got down to the bottom of what was causing the dispute. And we got the parties to say, listen, this is counterproductive for both of us.
That's right.
Let's apologize, clean slate, we'll withdraw the dispute.
Yeah.
So what I mean is that access to the courts is not appropriate in all circumstances. You need to look at, is this a case where we can settle it through everyday justice? Let's talk. What is the
Amicably.
problem? Exactly. Let's settle it amicably. You might have the next stage where we can't settle through face-to-face talk. So we might need a third party to come and mediate for us, to interject, to say, okay, I understand that you have this difficulty, but listen, let's look at the bigger picture.
That's right.
Let's settle this dispute. And if that doesn't work, then you might need to go to the last stage where you now say, okay, we need a judicial determination of this particular matter. So I strongly believe that disputes should be dealt with at the most appropriate level. And once we do that, we free up court resources to deal with those cases that really need a judicial determination.
Exactly.
Okay, a follow-up to that quickly. Recently, we heard about a seminar on construction of contract agreement and drafting of agreement by your office. Could you just bring us up to speed quickly, the means to that? Yeah.
So that training program is part of the larger competency framework we are trying to institute in the ministry. We occupy a very important role as officers in the Ministry of Justice and, in a wider sense, officers in the Delta State government. And what we want to ensure is that we are equipped to deal with the day-to-day problems that arise. So we want to be able to, in a sense, deliver value to our clients. Our clients are the government of Delta State and the people of Delta State. Now, when you look at construction projects, these are the projects that have the most immediate and significant impacts on the lives of Deltans. So you're talking about projects, for instance, that build roads, build schools, build hospitals, the means through which we can say tangibly our lives are improving. Now, when you now consider it in that perspective, anything that slows down the delivery of that project is detrimental to Deltans. So if there is a delay in finishing a road, well, commerce might be affected. Everyday lives can be affected. Your ability to get to school or a hospital can be affected. So we want to ensure that in drafting and implementing construction projects, we do so in the shortest time possible, ensuring that we keep to the budget allocated for that project.
Okay.
So this training program seeks to ensure that, number one, we recognize that disputes can arise from poorly drafted contracts. So we want to ensure that we understand the significance of each clause in that contract. Not only that, we didn't just do it for officers in the Ministry of Justice. We included from the Ministry of Works, the Delta State Capital Territory Development Agency, the Ministry of Housing, every single MDA that has a role to play one way or the other in delivering construction projects. So we spoke not only of the drafting of those contracts, but also the implementation of those contracts to ensure that we are not plagued with delays, which inevitably lead to increased costs and variation of contract prices. So that's really what served or motivated that training program.
Now, recently you also hosted previous attorneys generals who had served in the state. Now, what was the essence of that meeting? How would you describe their contributions towards the success recorded in the ministry and Delta State at large?
Yes, we did. So we have a standing body in the state. It's the body of past and present attorneys general. Okay. So that body already existed before I became Attorney General and Commissioner for Justice. Okay. Now, it's important to be able to leverage that body, to have constant engagements with past attorneys general. Primarily, I am standing on the success of each previous attorney general. The ministry is where it is today by virtue of the efforts that they put in place previously. Okay. And they have a wealth of experience. And it would be criminal, in a way, not to tap into that knowledge to ensure that what we're doing is, again, backed up by experience, backed up by evidence-based decisions. Okay. So we decided to meet. Incidentally, it coincided with the opening of the legal year. So many of the past attorneys general attended that opening of the legal year at the High Court Ceremonial Hall, after which we had a closed-door meeting in the Ministry of Justice. And the essence of that meeting was really, again, to consolidate the fact that we have this very experienced body that can assist where the need arises, and so also ensure that the ministry is also looking after the welfare of past attorneys general. So it's a very important body, and it's one that we intend to continue leveraging on as it goes. And as you know, come May 29, I will now join the body of past
Attorneys
General.
General.
So it's important
perhaps be
that
invited to another program where we have the past Attorneys General.
I will be delighted to attend. Thank you.
Interesting.
Thank you.
Okay, so a quick one, really. The Ministry of Justice under your watch had secured more judgment on sexual offences and other related crimes against this backdrop of insinuations in the past that the ministry had never won any case previously. Can you just tell us measures the ministry has put in place to curtail these ills in society?
Thank you so much for bringing up this question. You're correct. There is this general perception, and it's an incorrect perception, that the ministry is unprofessional and is incapable of securing these very important judgments that ensure that our streets, our society is safe. I can tell you that since the beginning of this year, the Sexual and Domestic Violence Unit in the Ministry of Justice has secured 8 convictions.
Okay.
8 convictions of sexual offenders. And we have also been able to, since the beginning of this year, now implement the Delta State Sexual Offenders Register, which again is very key in fighting the problems of sexual predators. Now, each conviction, we put the details in the Sexual Offenders Register, which is published in hard copy and also published on a website, and at the federal level goes to the Federal Register. And it's important that we highlight some of these successes. And I should commend the Domestic Violence and Sexual Offences Unit, headed by Mrs. Uche Kamaguna, for the superb job they are doing. And I always think it's important to highlight these successes to show that the ministry is working. And the ministry is working for the good of the citizens and residents of Delta State. And these successes are not just from that unit, the Sexual and Domestic Violence Unit. It cuts across all the units, but it's very important that we highlight some of these things to show that we are not just sitting in our offices doing nothing. No. We are working for the good of the state.
All right, now the man Isaiah Pozimo Esquire has a burning desire for hard work and dedication to duty. Please can you tell us what is this magic wand and the driving force in yourself?
No magic wand.
No,
I can tell you there's no magic wand. I firmly believe that there is no substitute for hard work. Okay. I firmly believe that irrespective of the position in which you find yourself, you have to give it 110%. Whether you find yourself as Attorney General, whether you find yourself as a road sweeper, whether you find yourself as a lawyer defending your client in court, whatever position you find yourself in, there is no substitute for hard work. There is a saying I heard a long time ago that the harder you work, the luckier you get.
And perhaps the more assignments you get.
Exactly. That is precisely why that somebody told me that. The harder you work, the luckier you get, because the harder you work, the more opportunities that come up for you. And when you do your very best in discharging your role in that opportunity, more roles will come. Amen. So that's a mantra that has never failed me. So in my appointment as Attorney General, I simply said, okay, well, let's go to work. Let's see how we can continue to improve on previous successes of past Attorneys General. Let's see how we can do things better. Let's recognize the areas we're not doing so well. And instead of pointing fingers, let's actually have a constructive discussion as to how we can make improvements, make marginal gains, make small wins. And when you add those cumulatively, you will see that it turns into a bigger gain for the ministry and by extension the government of the day. So no magic wand, just hard work and dedication to the role that has been given to you.
Now, do you have challenges in the course of rendering your services to people? How do you surmount those challenges, if at all you do have?
There are always challenges. You will find challenges irrespective of the situation in which you find yourself. The key is not to allow those challenges bog you down. Okay. The key is to say, okay, these challenges will come, But as professionals, what are we going to do to overcome it? Because that is what we are. In whatever position you find yourself in, when you are appointed to a role, you are discharging a professional duty. And it is your role, particularly as lawyers, to problem solve.
Yes.
So the fact that there is a problem should not be a problem. The fact that there is a problem means you are being called on to apply your expertise in reaching a solution. And like I said, when you work hard at it, when you look at what is actually the bare bones of this problem, when you break it down to see what is the cause of this issue, that's where you start finding solutions. That solution could be, well, we messed up here. Let us call the counterparty to see how we can have settlement discussions.
Yes.
It could also be that actually we have a very solid defense. We will tell you we have a good defense. And again, we want to talk to see how we can resolve it, but if you don't, we are prepared to go to court. It could be advising the government that this policy decision you want to take will have a negative implication.
Yeah.
So we suggest that we take an alternative path. So problems are not a problem. I hope I'm making sense when I say that.
Yeah.
When you're confronted with problems, it is what you are there for as lawyers, and we thrive in it. So we see it as a means of actually discharging our mandate for the good of our clients again, which is the government and people of Delta State.
Okay, so quickly, we're still looking at your purview as the Attorney General and Commissioner for Justice. We're talking about dispensation of effective justice delivery system. How does Delta State intend to place a premium on this system, and what measures is government putting in place to fast track delays in justice?
Again, a very important point. I touched on it in one of the earlier issues you raised with the Administration of Criminal Justice and Administration of Civil Justice Bill. Now, let me drill down to a very important part of what we want to do regarding those bills. In each of them, you will find that there are very extensive case management provisions. The situation in which we currently find ourselves, we allow lawyers, and I'm a lawyer, but we allow lawyers to control the pace of proceedings. So it's very easy for a lawyer to go to court and say, well, I'm not quite ready to proceed on this date, and it now agitates an adjournment. But what we want to do is we want to have a very robust planning at the beginning of the case. So at each stage, everybody knows what they're doing. And if by not sticking to the procedural timetable you cause a delay, then there have to be consequences. So case management is very key for us. Technology is also very key.
Yeah.
One of the issues that can prolong proceedings is our judges currently have to take their notes longhand. So we want to see how we can utilize technology to have automatic transcription of the proceedings, so the judge is freed up to actually manage the case before that court. Likewise, we want to take advantage of the use of virtual case hearings, and happily, the Honorable the Chief Judge has already implemented 2 cases through the use of virtual hearings. Ordinarily, because the litigants or the counsel were not in Delta State, that again would have caused an adjournment. But with the use of technology, we find that irrespective of where you are in the world, we can continue with case proceedings in court. So these are some of the things we want to do to implement to ensure that cases move quickly through the court system. Expeditedly through the court system.
Okay, moving forward by extension, this is outside the purview now. You were recently given an award of excellence by a television station for your outstanding performance. What was the reaction actually given to that award?
It's funny you should ask that question. Those who know me very well know that I'm very reluctant when it comes to things like awards because you can't quite tell which is genuine and which has secondary motivations to it. But nevertheless, when I received the award, I was very touched by the kind words that were expressed, and I felt in a way it was a recognition of some of the work we are doing in the ministry to ensure that things are being done efficiently and are being done professionally. So, well, I was very grateful. I'm not going to dwell on it. I'm not going to, because of an award, sit on my oars, the rest of my oars, to say, oh well, okay, I've been recognized. Let's be comfortable. Let's be comfortable at where we are. I'm never comfortable at any given stage of where I am. I'm always looking to see how can we take it one step up. How can we continue improving? So it's nice to be recognized. But my primary focus is not on these awards. It's on seeing
Job
how
delivery.
yes, it's on delivering on our mandate and to see how can we ensure, like I say, that we are delivering value to our clients.
Now there was this issue actually. We started with the fight against human trafficking, irregular migration. Now I just remember this issue of a local government being said to have a whole 900 victims. I mean, 900 victims, that this figure has been ascribed to one local government having 900 irregular migration in 1 month. So I want you to address this issue of 900 figures emanating from just a local government.
Yes, I came across this story. The local government to which you're referring, it's one of the ICA local governments, either ICA North or ICA South. And the claim was that in the month of October 2022, NAPTIP rescued 900 victims victims of trafficking from that local government area. I can tell you that that figure is incorrect, and grossly so. The actual figure is that across the entire 25 local governments in the state, between 2000 and I believe 14 to 2022, there were 926 rescued victims. So that figure is not quite correct. When I saw this, I did say, well, I'm grateful that the news outlet that broke that story is interested in the fight against human trafficking. But what we pleaded was that figures of this sort should be verified before they're put out in the public domain, because they can create a false narrative as to what the true situation is. The true situation is that 900 odd or 926 rescued victims is not from one local government. It's from 25 local governments across
put together.
Put together across a number of years. But the most important thing we should focus on is whether there is a coordinated fight against human trafficking in the state. And as I mentioned earlier, the task force is the center point for that fight. So the fight is ongoing. We will be happy. We will even be happy if we see 900 victims of trafficking rescued, because it means that those 900 persons have not fallen prey to these organized criminal organizations. But the truth of the matter is the figures are not that high. They're not that high. So it's a testament to the work of the various law enforcement agencies and organizations in the fight to ensure that we're able to catch victims of trafficking at a very early stage. But that 900 rescued victims in 1 month is blown vastly out of proportion.
All right, thank you.
Can you just speak to this conversation as we begin to wrap up quickly? Delta State was among the first states to domesticate the Administration of Criminal Justice Act 2015. There's no gainsaying the fact that this is an affirmation that Deltas deserve transformative change of criminal justice system. Can you speak to this conversation?
Absolutely. Deltans not only deserve transformative change in the criminal justice system, Deltans deserve transformative change across the board. Now, focusing on the ACJL, which is the Administration of Criminal Justice Law, that is correct. Delta State was one of the first to domesticate the Federal Administration of Criminal Justice Act. And as I mentioned earlier, while that law, which was 2016 law, was very laudable, again, we don't want to rest to say, oh, we were one of the first to implement, therefore, come and praise us. We were still looking at it and we were still reassessing. And now, once the new Administration of Criminal Justice Law is passed, Delta State will be, to my mind, the first state that has introduced extensive provisions on case management in criminal justice system. one of the first states that has legislated for the use of virtual hearings and technology in ensuring that cases progress. One of the first states to ensure that we reduce reoffending rates through the use of restorative justice and non-custodial sentences. One of, again, the first states that has extensive provisions on parole to ensure that we are not overcrowding our correctional centers, but that in deserving situations, we actually have an effective system of parole. So we are not just stopping at pushing the enactment of this bill. We are also mapping out an implementation process. So we understand that it will take some time to get used to the changes we are introducing. So in some provisions in the bill, we are seeing putting a period, a transition period, to say these provisions will take effect 6 or 12 months after the bill is enacted. And what we want to do in that transition period is to now start saying capacity building is key, information is key. So everybody who has a role to play now knows exactly what they need to do. And we are also tracking the successes or the failures in the implementation. So we will have impact assessments, engaging the relative successes of these measures we want to introduce.
Okay, so lastly, a few months from now, this administration will come to an end. I want you to take a look at the crystal ball. What would you love to be remembered for in the Ministry of Justice and the Delta State in general?
So, again, I don't like the focus being on myself, but I would like to leave behind a ministry that, like I said, is built on the successes of past attorneys general and sets up success for future attorneys general. I think we want to lay down a framework where we can implement positive change for the people and government of Delta State. We want to leave a legacy that the Ministry of Justice is a professional organization that is capable of delivering on its mandate. And I want to believe that with cumulatively, when you look at the various initiatives we are trying to introduce here, 2, 3, 4 years down the line, we will start to see the dividends of those reform initiatives. And that, to me, would be the ultimate crowning moment of the work we, as a ministry, are doing at the moment.
Actually, there's an issue we left out, sorry to bring it back, on the recently embarked judiciary inspection. What actually prompted that action, and what were your findings, on embarking on that?
So are you referring to the recent visits?
The recent visit, yes.
Yes, so it's not a one-off visit.
Okay.
It is actually, the Honorable Chief Judge is mandated by law to visit all custodial centers in the state at least once a quarter. Okay. So this was actually the 4th visitation we are having this year. Okay. And the purpose of that visit is to, number one, see whether cases are not progressing as quickly as possible, in which case the Chief Judge can intervene at that stage, and also to see if there are deserving circumstances to release inmates from the custodial centers. Okay. What we actually found, and it's important to highlight this point, one thing we found during those visits is that some of the initiatives we are implementing as a ministry to ensure that cases progress, we're actually seeing it materialize. Okay. So in the past, you would see, for instance, an inmate that has been awaiting trial for up to even 1 year in a custodial center. But what we've been able to do now is to bring the average time down to 17 days from when we receive a case file to rendering an opinion. Okay. So that prison visit was an opportunity for us to see that even some of the things we're trying to work on now are yielding fruit.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, the Attorney General and Commissioner for Justice. If you ask me, you're actually an interviewer's delight.
Exactly.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for bringing us up to speed on a lot of issues that has to do with your ministry. And so this is where we'll drop off this conversation this morning. We've been speaking extensively with the Attorney General and Commissioner for Justice, Isaiah Bozimo Esquire. And my takeaway, my executive summary, is that he's told us quite a lot as far as the judicial process is concerned. And it's on that note to drop it for today. Vivian, as we say our goodbyes quickly.
Yeah, I want to say, first of all, thank you so much for being on our program today, sir. And viewers, thank you so much for being here. And of course, from our last outing on today's ride, I hope you have learned a lot from our guest today on justice matters, as he actually told us a lot from the Ministry of Justice, Delta State. And we'll be with you again next time, Thursday. Yes, be with us again.